Badass of the Week is produced by High Five Content. It is May 12th, 1968. Deep in the jungles of Southeast Asia, Staff Sergeant Roy Benavidez and his Green Beret Special Forces are deep behind enemy lines. They're surrounded. All 12 men in his unit are seriously wounded, including Benavidez, who has already been shot multiple times. They don't know how many of the enemy are attacking them, but the number must be in the hundreds. But Staff Sergeant Roy Benavidez doesn't give up. In one arm, he carries a badly wounded comrade. In the other, he wields an AK-47 taken from the body of an enemy soldier he killed in hand-to-hand combat. In the clearing ahead, he can see a Huey hovering, waiting to evac the last of the wounded Americans. More enemy bullets zip overhead, just a few more yards. Benavidez grits his teeth, sprays a one-handed burst of covering fire from his captured AK, and sprints for it. Hello, and welcome back to Badass of the Week. My name is Ben Thompson, and today I am joined by our producer, Andrew Jacobs. Andrew, how are you doing today?
I am good. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm kind of transitioning into podcast mode. I just dropped my son off at daycare, and it's always a bit of a weird transition going from baby daycare drop off to recording Badass.
Yeah, they're not. It's like the same. It's basically it's a war zone over there. You know
that is true.
You should see the injuries and the
casualties.
It's like, you know, when my daughter's covered in red dots at the moment. So.
Yeah, my little guy had like 3 Band-Aids on his fingers because he kept falling off bikes and cutting himself with various things.
A burgeoning badass.
Yes, exactly. He wants to listen to audiobooks on the way to school in the morning. So we've been listening to Battletech, all the Battletech books. He loves that. We have all these little mechs at home that he knows the names of all of them. It's pretty cool. But yeah, it does feel like a combat drop sometimes when you're doing a drop off or a pickup.
Like the helicopter. You're like, go.
Get to the chopper.
Yeah. Which I think transitions nicely into a little bit of what we're going to talk about today. Yeah, so I mean, we've obviously been chatting about a lot of interesting badasses over the past few weeks. What we did last week was constitutional badasses.
Yeah, with AJ Jacobs. That was really fun.
Yeah, out of left field, which is nice. You know, Love the unexpected badass.
Yes.
We did oh man, not the from the Jengar.
Yeah, Handsome Mignon and the 10,000 Pintos.
Yeah, stealing 10,000 horses, not bad. Then
we had Ten Shuang.
Yeah,
we had Ten Shuang running down Everest. These are great stories, right? They're all badasses, and Handsome Mignon as well, like, is mythological, so he's not like a historian. So this week we're gonna kind of get back into a more traditional badass of the week.
I call it the meat and potatoes badass.
Yes.
Classic, right down the middle fastball.
Yes, this is going to be a story about a dude with a machine gun fighting bad guys, or fighting the enemy, I should say, getting shot at and doing some heroic stuff in the middle of a firefight with explosions and grenades and RPGs and all that stuff going off around him.
And incidentally, related to one of our early on, meat and potatoes badasses, Robert Howard.
That's right. Robert Howard was a member of the U.S. Special Forces operating in South Vietnam in the late 60s, early 70s. And that's the story we're going to get to today. We're going to talk about an American staff sergeant named Roy Benavidez, who is going to do some very heroic things, but he was in the same units as Robert Howard. And I'm sure they met, although they're not both involved in this particular story we're going to tell today. But that was a really fun one to do. Robert Howard's an awesome badass. If you guys haven't heard that episode, you should definitely go back and check it out.
Episode 4.
Yes.
You want to go back and check it out. It's episode 4. So you got to scroll way down the
But he's there, and it's a really fun one. And today we're going to get into another like real badass story from the conflict in Vietnam. This is
Cool.
going to be the tale of Roy Benavidez. And I do also want to say that, up until now, I have been doing this thing where I drink the drink from last episode's show. Today, I'm just drinking coffee because the fermented horse milk kind of, that was I might have taken that a little too far with the fermented horse milk. And also, it's 10 o'clock in the morning while we're recording this. Pat's on the East Coast, so we record later in the day with her. But now it's 10 o'clock in the morning, and it's more of a coffee kind of situation for me at the moment.
The fermented horse milk, leaves quite the hangover, but it could mix with your coffee a little.
I could put some in the coffee. Yeah, that's right. All right, we'll take a quick break, and while we're in the vacation,
do more fermented horse milk. But what would have been the drink from last week's episode?
The last week's episode was Martha Washington's rum punch. So Andrew sent me a recipe for Martha Washington's rum punch, which I will make.
That's definitely not a 10 a.m. on a Tuesday sort of drink.
Not on a Tuesday. Maybe brunch on a Saturday. That sounds pretty good. It's like really citrusy with some rum in it.
Yeah.
But right now it's coffee, and we're gonna take a really quick commercial break before we get into the next story, and maybe I'll put that fermented horse milk in the coffee while we're on break.
Good luck.
Thanks. It is May 12th, 1968. So pretty early on in the American involvement in the conflict in Vietnam. And there is a group of Green Berets. We'd be talking about the Green Berets with Robert Howard. There's a group of U.S. Special Forces troops assisted by some South Vietnamese army troops. They are on a recon mission somewhere in the vicinity of South Vietnam. We'll get into the full details of that in a little bit, but we'll say they're in or around South Vietnam at the time. They are infiltrating the jungles of the area, looking for North Vietnamese army positions. We're talking the Ho Chi Minh Trail, where the North Vietnamese were able to get troops and supplies from the north, way, way, way down into the south, behind U.S. lines, behind South Vietnamese lines. So these Green Berets are being sent out to on this recon mission to scout out enemy positions along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. They're out there, they're on these mission, and when the helicopters come back, the helicopters are like annihilated. The helicopters came in, they drop these guys off, they fly back, and they're shot to hell when they land back at the U.S. forward base. At the base is 33-year-old Staff Sergeant Roy P.
What is? Sorry, just to interrupt. I'm trying to remember what the Simpsons when he puts bullet holes in his car. And he calls them speed holes or something.
Yeah, that's what it's like. Yeah. So these guys are out on this mission, and Staff Sergeant Benavidez, he starts to hear the radio chatter as the helicopters are starting to come back. So he was kind of, hanging out on base, and, there starts to become some buzz that something's going on with that mission, right? They put in 12 Special Forces guys. We're going to go in and recon. But before they even got on the ground, they were under fire. They get attacked the second they land. The helicopters get shot up. They barely make it back to base. And as the helicopters are coming back over the radio, you're getting all this chatter from the soldiers who are getting shot up, right? They're getting attacked. They're getting wounded. One of the guys gets shot through the eye. And Benavidez is sitting there at base listening to all this on the radio. We're in big trouble. What we will learn about Roy Benavidez is that he is not the kind of guy that sits back and lets other people handle things. He handles it himself, or does the best he can. So when these helicopters are coming back, he's like, all right, these guys are in big trouble and I need to help them. So
let's qualify this. We're talking about Green Berets, right? And the one guy, I think I had read that he was shot through the eye and he was still fighting, right? He's still fighting. All of these they're all badasses. And so to be a badass among these guys is, a whole different it's a whole different level.
Yes. And Benavidez he's like Green Beret plus. And these guys are the toughest of the dudes that we have in our
Yeah.
army. The guy gets shot in the eye and he's still fighting. A lot of these guys are still out there fighting. A couple of them are killed within minutes of landing because they're under attack from everywhere. Wherever they landed, it was like the wrong spot because the North Vietnamese army has them completely surrounded and is shooting at them. And they've dug holes, they've dug trenches, so they must have known they're coming or expected them to land here because they've dug foxholes and trenches and they've set up heavy weapons, machine guns and mortars and all this stuff. These 12 guys are in big trouble. So Benavidez, he's like, I got to get out there and help these guys. So there's going to be a second group of helicopters flying out to try to rescue these guys. And he's like, I'm coming with you. So he grabs his rifle, he grabs his knife, he grabs as much ammo and medical supplies as he can carry. And he jumps on one of these rescue helicopters. He's like, I'm going to come with you guys and help out. The helicopters start to fly out and, the radio is still coming in and it seems really bad. We don't know how many guys there are out there fighting our 12 special forces guys whose number has been dwindled down to 8 to 10 now. But we expect it to be somewhere around 500 to 1,000 enemy soldiers out there in concealed positions in the jungle, dug into trenches with heavy weapons.
I don't like those odds.
Those are not good odds. Yeah, those are not good odds.
Personally, I don't like those odds.
Even if every dude there, because remember, Rambo was a Green Beret, right? If every one of those dudes is a Rambo who could kill 10 enemy soldiers, that's not enough, right?
Yeah.
And so we got to get these guys out of here, right? So Benavidez is flying on this helicopter, and they're coming into the landing zone to try to rescue these guys. And the second they reach the landing zone, the ground fire starts. They're shooting RPGs up at them. They're shooting anti-aircraft missiles and machine guns, all this stuff up at the helicopters. And the helicopters are getting shot up. They can't even get close to where these guys are fighting on the ground. And this is South Vietnam. So it's canopy jungle. You can't barely see the ground in a lot of places. You can't see even where these guys are shooting from, but you get close to where this battle is happening. And there's rockets and tracer fire coming up out of the canopy jungle. They can hear the helicopter. They might not even need to see it because they can hear them and they're just shooting in that general direction. The helicopters start taking some hits. They're like, we can't land here. We can't land here and rescue these guys. We're just going to get shot and they'll just be blown up helicopters and dead guys. There's no way. So Benavidez, he does the sane and rational thing. He says, okay, I get it. It's too dangerous. They're completely surrounded. There's a million guys here shooting at our dudes. You can't land a helicopter here. So let me out. Go find a safe spot. Fly away a little bit. Let me out, and I'll just run over there and help these guys.
Just let me out over there. I'll walk the rest of the way. Great.
yeah. And so that's what he does. They're like, "Are you sure?" He's like, "Yeah." So they land. They let him out, and he's got all these bags of morphine and first aid kits and medical supplies, extra ammo, extra grenades, all this stuff that he needs to bring to these guys who are fighting for their lives. And he just starts running through the jungle. He doesn't know where the bad guys are. He generally knows where his guys are. He's got a map coordinate for them, assuming they're all still alive or still there. He knows they're completely surrounded by bad guys. And so he just starts running.
I imagine he must be hearing at least I don't know how it works in the jungle, but if you hear it over there, you're like, yeah, there's a lot of action that way.
Yes, there's that, right? He knows where the fighting is. He just doesn't know where the guys who are shooting at his guys are, right? So the way I picture this is, did you see Band of Brothers? Do you know when Spears takes over as the commander of Easy Company, and they're like, it was weird because he just ran right past the Germans, and those Germans are there with their guns and their artillery and the Tiger tanks, and he
didn't even know past all of them.
Yeah. Like at first they didn't shoot at him because they didn't believe that there was just some crazy American running past them.
They were confused.
You should probably get Spears on the show at some point too. That guy was awesome. But so that happens here, except they do start shooting at him, and they hit him a few times. Oh. So he does make it to his allied lines. He does get there. He does wave like, hey, I'm on your team. Don't shoot me. He comes out. He jumps in with his guys who are all pretty badly shot up and wounded. But by the time he gets there, he has been shot and blown up a bit. So
just a little bit, just a flesh wound.
Yes. So he'd been hit a couple times with bullets that shot him with an AK a few times. He had some grenade shrapnel in his face, arms, and head. But he's still up and he's still ready to fight. And then when he gets there everybody there is in basically the same shape he's in. So he's there with like 8 or 9 other guys, and they're all pretty severely wounded. He's got medical care, he's got ammo, he's got grenades, he can resupply them, but now he has kind of voluntarily got himself stuck in an ambush or a trap because he thought maybe he could make a difference to save some of these guys. That's the story. That's Benavidez, and that is literally just the beginning of the story.
Yeah, the end. The end.
Yes. Okay, so he's a staff sergeant, so he's a higher ranking sergeant. He can kind of take command when he gets there and start organizing guys. So he's surrounded by enemy troops with AKs and RPGs and mortars, grenades, all this stuff. And he starts running around giving these first aid kits to the soldiers, trying to move them, trying to help them organize a better defensive position. Meanwhile, he's also shooting his gun at the bad guys. And when he fires, he's firing his rifle the whole time, and his M16 runs out of ammo, and he runs out of extra ammo, and he starts picking up AK-47s from dead North Vietnamese soldiers, which should tell you like the situation he's in right now. Because, in a video game, you'll run around and you'll shoot bad guys, and you'll run over their dead bodies and auto pick up their ammo and their weapons and use them and stuff. But in a real war, it's really not that common to be close enough to an enemy soldier that you can pick up his weapon. Like, these guys are on top of the Green Berets. They are, but they're able to hold their position. And this isn't like, 15 minutes. This is like a couple hours that he's there with these guys trying to hold off these attacks. And they're coming, they advance, they fall back, they advance, they fall back. He's driving off separate attacks. There's a lot of fighting happening here.
I hope he brought lunch.
Yes.
Sandwiches for everyone.
Yes. And they eventually, the U.S. is able to bring in, like, the American helicopters are able to get close enough to find a landing zone. So he's been moving and shooting and fighting. They get to an area where there's a clearing where you can bring in helicopters. Helicopters come in. He's got his guys who are all pretty badly wounded. He's pretty badly wounded, but he starts like carrying guys to the evacuation point. He makes 6 separate trips. And there's a very famous statue of him where it shows him like he's got like a tourniquet around his eye, around his head, from where he got blown up in the head with grenade shrapnel. So he's got this like white tourniquet wrap around his head. He's got like a bandage on his arm. He's carrying a wounded special forces guy, and he's holding an AK-47 with a bayonet on it, like out with one arm, shooting it with one hand while he's carrying the guy with the other hand while he's running to the helicopter.
I'm thinking very, very Forrest Gump Lieutenant Dan, except more badass.
More badass, right? They're still shooting at him. He's shooting back. It's wild. And he does this 6 times. After he loads 6 different guys onto this rescue helicopter, he goes back because some classified documents were left. He goes back, finds those documents and brings them back, gets them on the helicopter. And right as he's like, finally finishing, he's got everything there. He's like, all right, we're all good. Let's go. He starts to run, and there's an explosion behind him as he's running to the helicopter that like completely like rifles his back with shrapnel and knocks him on the ground and knocks him unconscious. Or he's losing consciousness. It's kind of, the world is kind of spinning and fading and turning black around him. And as that happens, an RPG hits the helicopter that he just loaded up with all these guys and equipment and blows it up. And he passes out. However, this is not the end of this story. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about how Roy Benavidez handles adversity and how that might be different than the way you and me might handle adversity. Welcome back. We are with Roy Benavidez in the vicinity of South Vietnam in 1968. He has heard that a group of Special Forces soldiers, there's 12 guys, they landed, they got immediately attacked. Some of them were killed. All of them were wounded to various degrees of severity. Benavidez volunteers to join the rescue operation, goes in by himself with ammo and weapons and medical care and grenades, finds this, like runs past the besieging enemy forces, finds his guys,
helps them organize and fight their way out of this ambush, gets them to a landing zone, personally loads all of these guys onto a helicopter. He's being shot the whole time. He's been shot 7 or 8 times now. He's been hit with several different explosives, grenades and mortars and stuff like that. He's extremely badly wounded. And he's managed to load all these guys on the helicopter, which is then blown up along with him. He loses consciousness. He awakes a short period of time after losing consciousness to find the helicopter on fire, and wreckage all around him. For you and me, I think, Andrew, that's kind of the end of the story. I'm like, well, good night.
For him, that was just a little nap.
Yes. For him, that's not the end of his story.
Yeah.
So Roy Benavidez has been he's 33 at the time that this happens. He's been a badass his entire life. He was born and raised outside Houston, Texas. He's of Mexican and Yaqui tribe heritage, but he lost both of his parents by the time he was 7 years old. And he spent most of his early life trying to take care of his family members. He was shining shoes. He picked cotton. He did whatever he could to, he wasn't going to school. He was working early on, trying to make money to help his family survive. And as soon as he could, he joined the military so that he could help provide for his family. That's why he's doing this. He signed on. He had already been serving for 16 years in the military at this point, in various capacities. And this was not, even though this is kind of a pretty serious deal that's happening here, this was not the first time that Roy Benavidez had been severely wounded in action. Andrew, did you come across the story about when he was with the 82nd Airborne?
Yeah. So, I mean, looking his story, you think it would actually end a lot earlier, and that's what the doctor suggested. So when he was 4 years earlier on a solo reconnaissance mission,
which is also badass.
Just sneaking around alone out in the jungle. He stepped on a landmine. Now, I mean, I don't know a lot about landmines, but that seems bad.
Yeah. They're not supposed to be stepped on. They're designed to kill people who step on them.
Yeah. And so clearly got a little, as we call it here at my house, got a little ouchie. Had to see the doctor, and
bringing that preschool drop off back into the.
It's all preschool language around here. Had to see the doctor, and they basically told him he would never walk again. So 4 years before this whole incident you've been describing, Roy is in a medical ward off his feet, and the doctors are preparing his discharge papers because he's going to be like, in a wheelchair or something. Mm-hmm. But Roy, that's not his style. So I think he was like, no, not a chance in hell. Not only am I going to walk again, but I need to get back out there.
Yeah, how am I supposed to run past enemy soldiers with AK-47 shooting me from 4 inches away if I can't walk?
I feel like most people will be like, no, I'm gonna walk again. I want to walk at my daughter's wedding or something like that. He's like, no, I need to walk back into a combat zone. So he starts, he ignores doctor's orders, and in the middle of the night, he starts getting out of bed to do his own physical therapy. Apparently, he would crawl using his elbows and chin. I'm getting this a little bit from Wikipedia. Crawl using his elbows and chin to a wall near his bedside, and then in parentheses, Wikipedia says, with the encouragement of his fellow patients, many of whom were permanently paralyzed and or missing limbs. So if you can imagine the scene, of like just a bunch of really badly wounded dudes in there watching Roy being like, this guy won't stop.
Can't keep him down, right? He's crawling over there, and his buddies are like, you go do it, right? And like, these are all wounded veterans, right? These are all guys who were wounded in combat. And wow, just wild.
And so he'd prop himself against the wall and attempt to lift himself up, and he'd wiggle his toes and then his feet. And apparently, after several months of this, by his own admission, he says that often left him in tears, he managed to get to the point where he could walk. And in July of 66, Roy walked out of the hospital with his wife at his side. Now, again, for most people, it'd be like, that's the end of the movie. It's great.
That's the badass story, right? That's the badass story. I stepped on a landmine. I lived. I was told I would never walk again, and then I freaking did it. I taught myself to walk, even though the doctor said I'd never walk again. Right. That is like it's amazing. That's an Academy Award-winning movie if you do it right. It's amazing.
And so he gets out of the hospital. He's like, "Honey, all right." He was, I got to go back to work. So he goes back.
So this is less than 2 years after that. Less than 2 years after he left that hospital. We are in May of 68 now. He's been shot 4 times at this point. He's been blown up twice. Once with a grenade and once with with this mortar or whatever it was that hit him. He doesn't know. And he's laying on the ground and he's looking at this burning helicopter. And so what does he do with his now no longer paralyzed legs? He gets back up, he runs over to the burning helicopter and he starts pulling guys out of it. He carried these guys all the way across this open field to the helicopter. It got blown up, and now he starts pulling guys out of the helicopter, trying to organize them, like, who can still fight? Because we're in big trouble here, right? This helicopter got blown up. There's bad guys around here. They're surrounding us from all sides. We need to fight our way out. We're not done yet. Get who needs ammo, who can fight, who can't. He starts passing out ammo. He's passing out AK-47s. He's passing out NVA weapons because that's all they have left for ammo. And he's given morphine to guys who are in real bad shape. And he still has to hold off like a battalion of enemy soldiers, like 1,000, like literally 1,000 bad guys with 10 of your guys, including him. So what does he do? He gets on the radio and he starts calling in airstrikes. He starts calling in napalm. He starts calling in gun runs, and he's given them basically his position. He's like, "We're not getting out of here. I can see the enemy. You're gonna have to drop weapons on them, and I know that's really close to me. I know that requires some pretty crazy accuracy from the air at like Mach 1 or whatever, And so he starts calling in napalm runs, to set the whole forest on fire around him. This continues for a while. They're fighting for hours, 6 hours all told of fighting, from the moment he got into the action until the moments that a new landing zone starts to open up for them. They've been fighting. Everybody's wounded. He's wounded more, but he's been able to maneuver to a new landing zone, an open area. He throws some smoke out to give the helicopters an idea of where to land and to give them a little bit of visual cover. And he's been kind of dragging his guys along with him, literally dragging his guys along with him. American helicopters are starting to come in. The North Vietnamese realize like this is kind of our last chance to stop these guys. So they mount one last full on attack to try to crush these last stubborn guys who just will not give up and will not die. So from all around him in the jungle is this big yell, and the North Vietnamese come running out, and they've got bayonets on their rifles, and they just come charging over. The Green Berets are shooting at them. They're shooting them down, but it's not enough. There's too many bad guys, and they jump into the trenches with all of these super wounded Special Forces guys.
That does not sound.
Sounds bad, yeah. Sounds bad.
We're talking hand-to-hand combat now.
We are talking about hand-to-hand combat. And remember, he has been shot like several times now. He's been shot like 6 times at this point. He's been blown up 2 or 3 times. That one guy's still fighting with one eye.
So he's at like only 80% instead of 100.
Yeah, he's not functioning at 100%. He gets bayoneted a couple times in hand-to-hand combat. He's got his bayonet and his rifle. He's fighting. He's surrounded by guys. He's outnumbered. He gets stabbed a couple times with a bayonet. He gets his jaw broken. Somebody hits him in the face with the butt of their AK and breaks his jaw. But he's got his pistol. He's got his bayonet. He's got his rifle, his knife, and he's fighting these guys. And somehow they drive them back. Somehow these 8 Special Forces guys. Some of these Special Forces, it's like some of them are Americans, and a couple of these Special Forces guys are South Vietnamese soldiers, I should mention. And they fight these guys off and somehow drive them back.
At this point, they're the North Vietnamese are like, I don't think we can actually kill these people.
Yeah, this is no fair.
I stabbed him several times and he's still going. I think they're.
I need to switch this to a lower difficulty level. This is BS.
These guys are T1000s. They hadn't seen Terminator, but they knew they were from the future. They were robots from the future. Yeah.
Just bullet sponge enemies. Difficulty set up too high. This game is no fair. Drives him back. Yeah. So, I mean, for real, like Benavidez has been wounded 37 times at this point. Bayonets, bullets, shrapnel wounds, being punched and kicked, hit with a rifle, bayoneted. And he gets all of his guys onto this helicopter. When the helicopters land, they have heavy machine guns and they start shooting from the air. Helps drive the North Vietnamese back. And but they're still shooting, and the helicopter comes down. He's getting his guys onto it. He's the last guy on the helicopter. He's bleeding everywhere. He's not in good shape. He can barely walk. He kind of pulls himself onto the helicopter, which is still getting shot at. And these helicopter pilots, like, we're going to talk about Vietnam helicopter pilots in a future episode, but like these pilots are heroic, right? It's amazing what they're doing.
These are the guys that you always see. I feel like in I'm sure they were wearing uniforms, but you always imagine them wearing the Hawaiian shirts because they're a little crazy in the head. Right?
Yeah, really. Like, and they're like, super dangerous and super technically complicated, right? Like not easy maneuvers they're doing if they weren't getting shot at. But yeah, these guys, they pull out. The helicopters pull out. They're getting shot up, but they get out of there and they make it out and they clear the combat zone. And when Benavidez finds out that they're clear, he passes out. During 6 hours of fighting, he's wounded 37 times and he's credited with saving the lives of 8 of those 12 guys. So those 12 special forces guys that went in, plus him making 13, 8 of them made it out of there alive, which is just unbelievable considering they were fighting a thousand enemies for 6 hours. And we're completely surrounded.
Not too shabby.
Yeah, a team would go by later, a few days later, an American team would go by to, investigate the site. And they said that they found 30 enemy foxholes loaded with mortars and heavy machine guns and stuff. And there were more enemy soldiers dead than they had time to count. Rescue helicopters land at the base. They start medevac. They start pull all the seriously wounded guys out of the helicopter and start getting them into the hospital. Roy Benavidez is one of the last people to be loaded off the helicopter. He's not moving. He's bleeding badly. They load him onto a gurney. They wheel him into the morgue, and he's
motionless. He's just like limp.
Yeah, they think he's dead. They put him on a gurney. They roll him into basically the morgue, and they start to zip up a body bag around him. And just before they can get the body bag fully zipped, he spits at the doctor who's zipping him into a body bag. Just one last act of defiance with your last hit point.
Doctor's like, no, this guy is dead. And they're always like, no.
No, I'm not dead. I have no energy to do anything other than just kind of spit at you, but I'm still alive here. And they rush him to surgery, and he lives. It takes him several months of rehab and several surgeries, but he survives this battle. He survives the Vietnam War and lives to be 63 years old, which is amazing. Stepped on a landmine, got blown up by
considered.
Hit in the face with an AK-47. Yeah. And for his actions in this battle, he received the Distinguished Service Cross, which is the second highest award for bravery offered by the U.S. government. And
the second highest award.
Second highest, yeah. And it was the second highest because of a little caveat, right? Because I cannot imagine anything more heroic. I write about these stories all the time, whether it's World War II or Vietnam or modern day stuff. I write a lot of stories of, one-man armies doing heroic stuff on a battlefield. And this, for me, I think it's my favorite of all of these stories. But yeah, second highest. Okay, what can you imagine? Not bad.
Not bad. But really, that's it.
Silver medal. Yeah, silver medal. Well, the reason for that is because remember how I said this was taking place in the general vicinity of South Vietnam? Well, much like with Robert Howard, this action actually took place in Cambodia.
Now tell me, Ben, were we at war with Cambodia?
We were not at war with Cambodia. We were not supposed to be in Cambodia. The Ho Chi Minh Trail was in Cambodia. That's why it was there, because America was not supposed to be there. But, doing a Medal of Honor would have kind of drawn a little bit of attention to it. And we really don't want
details. The exact
yeah, little details. So it was only after the details of the battle had been declassified that when word came out, it was like, yeah, it was in Cambodia, but also it was like a lot, because the original version was, they cited him like a little bit less badass story too, right? Like, oh, we'll tell like the light version of your story, and we'll say it was in South Vietnam. That's a Distinguished Service Cross. But when everything got declassified, that yes, the United States was doing a lot of operations in Cambodia during the Vietnam War to try to fight this Ho Chi Minh Trail. Once that came out, and they were like, actually, this Benavidez guy is like way more badass than we'd said before. Like, he's actually going to get the Medal of Honor. So when it got declassified, they upgraded his award to the Medal of Honor, which of course it should be.
Yeah. Does he? That's cool. Does he get to keep the distinguished, or does he have to turn that? Is it like a trade? Do you know?
Oh, I don't know. I know you can't wear them both on your uniform at the same time, because if you get it and then it gets upgraded for the same thing, you can't wear them both on your uniform at the same time because you didn't get both.
Good to know.
One. But I don't know if you have to hand it back to them. That would be weird.
Swap. It's just you give us that one, we'll give you this one.
Yeah. When you turn that one in, if you don't turn it in 30 days, we're going to bill you for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Medal of Honor, Roy Benavidez, there's statues to him in his hometown. And that one statue of him with the bayonet, the AK has a bayonet on it, and he's shooting it with one hand. He's holding it sideways because it looks awesome. He's carrying like a wounded guy on his shoulder, running to a helicopter. That was him. He did that for 6 hours on 2 legs that he was not supposed to walk on. It's badass.
Not bad. Well, some other things I think worth noting. He was the 1981 Texan of the Year.
Okay.
So that's something.
That was right around the time things were getting declassified.
Yeah, I mean, now I'm curious who the other Texans of the Year have been. I mean, where we might be missing some badasses here. A lot of them coming from Texas.
Yeah. There's don't mess with Texas.
There was a G.I. Joe Roy Benavidez commemorative edition from 2001. I mean, Medal of Honor G.I. Joe figure. That's about on par, I think.
It's him and Sergeant Slaughter, I think. Didn't Sergeant Slaughter get the Medal of Honor?
Yeah.
No, wait, he was the WWF World Heavyweight Champion.
He's got a whole slew of buildings named after him: schools, parks, artillery training areas, a military range at Fort Knox. Not bad. Mm-hmm. And I think he's got a U.S. Navy ship named after him. It's a cargo ship. So, and then of course a Texas highway.
Right.
So
because it's worth mentioning, he didn't leave the Army after this. He still wasn't done. He stayed in the military. He ended up becoming a master sergeant, which is a pretty senior sergeant before he retired. But he wasn't done. He was the same thing. I was like, all right, honey, I'm going back. Got work to do.
All right. Well, I mean, yeah. What a guy.
Yeah. Crazy story, but awesome and extremely badass. And one of those no doubters that, like, as we said in the intro, I do love talking about badasses who did something very difficult and heroic and stuff. But there is also the original badasses for the website were dudes who kicked ass, and usually with violence, and that's Roy Benavidez.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. We will be back next week with a new one. Please do like and subscribe and share these episodes with your friends if you like them, and we really hope you do. And if please feel free to review us and leave us some feedback, because that's really valuable to us. All right. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you on the next one.
Stay badass.
Executive producers are me, Ben Thompson, Dr. Patricia Larish, and Andrew Jacobs. Writing is by me and Pat. Story editing by Ian Jacobs. Mixing and music and sound design by Jude Brewer. Special thanks to Noel Brown at iHeartRadio. Badass of the Week is based on my website, badassoftheweek.com, where you can read all sorts of stories about other badasses. If you want to reach out with questions or ideas, you can email us at badasspodcast@badassoftheweek.com. If you like the podcast, please subscribe, follow, listen, tell your friends, and tell your enemies. And please leave us a rating. We'll be back next week with another one.